What, a child that is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth, story do you have? I met this kid while in junior high. Knew him his first year in high school. Back in 78-79. Remember the movie Carrie? He had that for a mother. He was super religious and had to pray multiple times a day. Carried a large Bible with his school books. Wore old-fashioned formal clothes, 1950s style haircut, and horned-rimmed glasses. His mother punished him because she saw us talking when he got off the school bus. I guess I didn't pass the friend standard. He was so unsocialized and awkward. He was grateful to speak with anyone. And I didn't make fun of him. I guess it got to be too much. He didn't come back to school for the sophomore year. I later learned that while his mother was sleeping, he doused her with gasoline and set her and the bed on fire. She lived. And they just disappeared. I never heard of him again. There was that nuclear revenge post about a guy ostracized by the entire town, I think cause he was born out of wedlock, and after getting out of there became an inspector of some kind. Eventually he was given a list of factories that needed reviewing and one needed to close. The factory in his hometown was on the list. He goes there, inspects, they act all buddy-buddy thinking they're safe from closure. Boy were THRY wrong. Every infraction, breach of safety, incorrect anything went into his report. The whole town basically was built around that factory, and when it shut down the town was desolate and dead within a few years. A guy I went to high school with burned the bridge with his entire family. We weren't best friends, more of a friend type of situation, so my info is a lot of hearsay. But I do know some things for certain. He was the middle child, with an older sister and a younger brother. His parents had owned a diner and it had been in his family for a few generations. It was an unspoken rule that the kids of each generation would help out when they were little, and eventually take it over to keep it in the family. The problem was none of them wanted anything to do with it. It was the easiest way to set him off, even mentioning it would have him go from 0 to 100 real quick. This didn't stop either of his parents though. They would joke about how the kids didn't need to worry about college, or moving away, all of that would be taken care of when they would run the diner. The sister, being the oldest, was the first really pressured into it, but he and his brother told her to get out and don't look back, and don't let them guilt trip you. So she did, and goes to college on a sports scholarship and then moves a few states away. She occasionally visits but more or less left the town in her rearview mirror. Then it was his turn, but unfortunately he didn't have the money to get away, so his parents tell him to go to community college and work at the diner to save money. This is where the issues started. The younger brother doesn't go to college, and decides to go couch surfing and backpacking across the country for a few years. Occasionally coming back to work for a few weeks when he needed the money, only to take off again. So my friend gets left running the place, despite swearing he never would. I'd see him around sometimes at bars, and he was a bitter shell of his former self with a bad drinking problem and a series of failed relationships. His parents didn't seem to care that their son was a depressed alcoholic, so long as their family legacy stayed the same. He confided in me how they were pushing him to get married and give them grandkids, to settle down and let go of this silly dream of starting over when he has the diner. Which, given how shit-faced he was in nearly every interaction I had with him, it's impressive he was able to run it. His sister and brother couldn't be bothered to come down and help, and in fact they started to agree with the parents that he should just cut his losses and make this life work for him. One day, he drops off the face of the earth. Nobody sees or hears from him for 3 weeks. His parents say he went on a vacation, and they also hadn't heard from him. Then suddenly he's back in town, seemingly in much better spirits, looking healthier than we had seen him in years. About 2 months later the diner is torn down and replaced with some other business. As it turns out, his girlfriend at the time gave him an ultimatum. Quit the drinking and go to therapy or we're done. So he does, and the therapist points out the obvious things linking his depression and says he should take a vacation and figure out what else he wants to do with his life. He went to Vegas, partied for 2 weeks and admittedly thought about killing himself. After getting it out of his system, he devises a plan to sell the diner and pocket the money for himself. Everything was in his name as the owner anyway, so it was pretty easy. He took the best offer he could, and used that money to leave town. The brother and sister didn't get a dime, and the parents were already retired. He moved to the other side of the country with his now wife, and we follow each other on social media, but he seems much happier. Apparently he hasn't spoken a word to his family in years, nor they to him, and does not intend to start. Growing up, our neighbors had a couple boys, 10 and 14 plus / at the time of this story. The younger son had a good friend that would stay at their house very frequently. He was always pretty quiet and kept to himself, except when he was with his friend, the 10Y/0, which was when he could be himself. One day we find out that he was permanently moving in with my neighbors due to an unsafe situation at home. Apparently this poor kid got to watch his mother be murdered by her boyfriend, all because drugs. Right. I in front of him. The 10-year-old. Luckily my neighbors stepped up and offered to take him in, which was actually great for everyone. He really started to blossom and became pretty stable, with a caveat, he just didn't take any shit from anyone. Which leads us to our terrific act of rebellion. Like everyone else in our neighborhood, we rode the bus home. This kid is riding home from elementary school when the bus driver started going off on the kids for real, or imagined indiscretions. Well, this kid takes offense to this and speaks up on behalf of the rest of the kids. Bus driver, now royally pissed, angry, for our non-us crowd, tells this kid one more word and I'm kicking you off the bus. Well, you are correct in your assumption of what transpired next. Kid gets kicked off the bus, which royally pisses him off, so QMC kid walks off the bus, and immediately walks in front of the bus. We were about a mile from his normal stop at our street, and this was a 2-lane road with sporadic oncoming traffic. No way the driver could get away with trying to pass, so he drove at a walking pace until the kid got to our street. Parents were wondering where their children were, as everyone was now 30+ minutes late, and were overall very amused when they discovered the cause. Still about the most proud of a 10-year-old I've ever been, and I have 2 of my own. Anyway, I gotta look that guy up. Hope he's well. My bio parents lost custody of me due to addictions and neglect. I was adopted as a teenager by a woman who ended up being emotionally abusive, and I was supposed to be thankful because she pulled me out of the gutter and gave me opportunities in her mind. She's an extravagant spender and has blown through 2 large inheritances and a divorce settlement, years of alimony, and refused to get a job, even though she holds multiple master's degrees in a desirable field, used the school loans to continue funding her lifestyle instead of working. She never saved for retirement despite having the means and opportunity to do so. Growing up, she told me I would grow up to be a drug-addicted dropout. I suspect that her bio children were her retirement plan because she told them to marry rich and pushed them into what she thought would be lucrative degrees. It was a classic scapegoat/golden children scenario. She never fathomed that of all her kids, it would be me that broke 6 figures having landed a great career. Too bad for her that I cut her off 7 years ago and never looked back. She's now in her 60s having to start over financially. Her children don't make enough to support her and I won't contribute. Not a village but a woman's marriage. When I was in elementary I was forced to be in the normal music class instead of the special ed class, I'm going to the proper terms, mainstreamed and assisted cause I like them more, for years. Even after my mom and both of my therapists requested I get put in the assisted class for sensory reasons, I'm autistic and had sensory overloads daily in this class. The teacher said I was lying to them and always did quiet activities when someone sat in on the class. So I suffered every Monday and Wednesday I had school from when I was 4 to when I was 10. But then I went to middle school and life moved on. I still loved music so I tried to join choir. I was denied for 2 years but got in when I was 12. I'm a pretty good singer and had no other extracurricular activities so I began helping the choir director. Eventually he asks me if his daughter, who's also autistic, could be good with music like I was. He says her music teacher in elementary school says she's terrible with music and throws tantrums in class. I say she's most likely not having tantrum instead having a sensory overload because 38-year-olds playing the recorder at once is hell. Other than a few other questions about his daughter it's the last I hear of this elementary school music class. A couple years later I'm bringing my mom lunch in my old high school, she works there as an assisted class teacher, and I see my old choir director and his daughter. We catch up and eventually they leave to get lunch together and I chat with my mom. She says you're one of the reasons he divorced his wife. I'm like what? And she explains that his ex-wife was the elementary school music teacher and when I said elementary school music class is sensory hell he found out she doesn't believe autism exists and thinks you can fix neurodivergent kids by making them so uncomfortable they become normal. Not a good attitude for the mom of an autistic kid. She also refused to take a course on how to teach mainstreamed special needs kids so she also lost her job. No regrets. A kid who was relentlessly bullied at my school for years sued the district and got an upper 6-figure settlement. Quite a literal version. Had a kid come to my 9th grade classroom with 4 felony arson counts. We knew before he got there that he had 4 felonies, just not in what, and his other 3 teachers and the principal called an emergency meeting where they didn't want him in their rooms at all. Principal wanted us to either give up our planning or teach him after regular hours. I adamantly told them to get fucked, that I wouldn't give my planning up for God himself, and least restrictive environment said he was in the classroom. TBF, I already had a room full of gang members, so what was another kid with felonies? Turns out this kid has never met his dad, and his mom worked 3 to 4 jobs. Only got to see her like ma Eid once a week. He was breaking into homes for food and then burning them down for attention. It was really just a cry for help. I liked the kid and he had me first period. Would come in high as a fucking kite and give him cherry coke and bagels to eat. Never skipped my class. Never misbehaved after the first week with me. Everyone hated on him and he lashed out accordingly. Started reading a porn mag and drinking a 5th of vodka in math class, etc. Ended up getting expelled despite my intervention. Few months later he was arrested and charged as an adult after a string of breaking and entering with arson and robbery. He got some girlfriend who convinced him to rob places to steal her shit, which OFC he did. BC no one else was acting like they loved him, and OFC he went back to setting fires. Torched at least half a dozen homes. If my story counts, but I'll tell it anyway. I worked as an audio-visual technician for 6 years. I was making $15/HR. I would sometimes run a crew of 15 people and tell them how to set/strike a room. Even trained the new hires in the same position as me. Later I find out the 2 new hires I've been training the past 2 years were making $17/HR. That's $2 more than what I was making. I wrote a 10-page email to the company's district director on why I was leaving. I put in my 2-week notice just as we were about to hit one of our busiest seasons. Heard the clients were pissed that everything was in scrambles, lol. Should have treated me better. My first new job offer after I left was $42/HR starting. I'm now a video specialist/camera operator. Scary to think I would have been stuck at my old job if they paid me $2 more, lol. Everything worked out for the better. Someone I used to have in a support group I once helped run for sexually victimized and abused young men shared with us what happened to him. I'm not going into the finer details of it, but the broad stroke is he was being victimized by a TA. He went to other teachers, school admins, and even police. No one believed him, and he even got punished for making it up to get a staff member in trouble. It destroyed his personality. He became bitter, resentful, spiteful, and generally hateful of other people. He was improving his demeanor in the group, but from what he tells us he just wanted to watch the world die at the time. A couple years later that same TA tripped down the stairwell in one of the side hallways of the school and he happened to be nearby. He saw she was badly injured and likely had broken bones and was bleeding from her head. Instead of helping her, he literally stepped over her and pretended she wasn't there. Security footage showed he wasn't the one to push her, but when asked why he didn't say anything or get help, he simply said that last time he tried to tell people about something involving her, no one helped, so why would they this time? One of my friends in high school was a major overachiever. Stayed at school or work as much as possible, to the point where he may have spent an hour or less at home a day. He would always deflect questions about his home life, but confided in me that it was bad. Calling him the black sheep of the family would be a major understatement. His family had some money, not millionaire or billionaire, but better off than most, and they told him from elementary school he would always be useless and never amount to anything. He is making bank after getting through college and finding a bum job with a big pharmaceutical company. Meanwhile his father's company, that has been in the family for a few generations, got picked apart by the government. Someone tipped them off that he was lying on taxes, hiring immigrants for next to nothing, hiding OSHA violations, and much more. As the dust was settling and the damage was really being seen, my buddy drove to his former family home and dropped off a file. The same file he gave an attorney that gave it to the government, and only said, "Who won't amount to anything." A pastor I lived next to constantly berated a kid in my class about everything from his hair length to him not fully embracing the word of the Lord. The kid routinely went into the pastor's backyard and would shit in his pool along with several of his friends all at once. They would also throw dead animals they found in there as well, ranging from a squirrel to a opossum. Honestly, don't even blame the kid. That pastor was judgmental as fuck and no one liked him. For 53 years, my father gaslit me and always made me feel like one day he would be a real father. Well, he's in his 80s and has Parkinson's and is married to a terrible woman, and I no longer help him or my stepmother in their old age because they are such terrible people. Now, they have to find other people to give them rides, to lift things, to listen to doctors, etc. Oh, I also informed my stepmother that the day my father dies and while she is picking out a casket, I will march into the IRS to report her for committing tax fraud with my father. There is no statute of limitations and I want her to sweat every time she hears him cough, sneeze, or moan. F them. My mother was abusive to my sister and I growing up. Sis ended up anorexic, has been in therapy her whole life, took years and years to fix herself and still isn't there. I ended up with bad generalized anxiety, social anxiety, bipolar, depression and self-loathing, and was emotionally and verbally abusive in past relationships. My mom used to make us promise we'd never put her in a home when she got old. Last year my mental problems came to a head, and I started therapy, medication, and being honest with my parents about my mom's abuse. I gave them an ultimatum of either acknowledging the damage and taking responsibility by apologizing for it so we could move forward, or I'd never speak with them again. My dad apologized immediately, he was less abusive than she was, and held more guilt than she ever did. We're on good terms now. My mother denies everything and has been totally cut off by my sister and I. She will end up in an old folks' home after all. She has no children left. Consequences of her own actions. So I didn't burn down a village but I did burn down that relationship. The axe forgets, but the tree remembers. I was lied to by HR, and it led to me not getting a promotion. I basically put them in a position where I couldn't be replaced and messed with the Excel codes I made for them that saved managers 6 hours a day. I didn't correct what I knew would get us high fees since it wasn't technically my job. Then I quit. 700K in fines, nobody trained to do scheduling, department without anyone to run it, and additional work for the managers was the damage. I started getting calls to help them fix it. I'm sure you can imagine how well that went for them. Edit, to everyone complaining about my actions here, this was years ago. The Excel document automation wasn't something I was asked to do. I did it because having the manager free made everyone else's job easier. The document literally needed to be made once a month in order to keep functioning. On top of that, this isn't some mom and pop shop that got hit with this. This was a multi-million-dollar company. I was doing work above my pay grade, and outside of the scope of my job, I just stopped doing the extra. How is everyone feeling about Donald Trump officially being under arrest? That guy from Home Alone too? Wow, just goes to show you really never can tell. I've been hurt before. Oh come on baby, we live in a country where rule of law matters and actions have consequences. Never again am I trusting my heart to Lady Justice. Great. Now let's start going after all politicians and other government officials. Annoyed Donald Trump is back in the news. I just wish more people understood that he's being charged for things that he did before he became president, for using campaign money as his own piggy bank, something politicians are frequently accused of, but rarely seem to be held accountable for. Of course I don't expect anyone to change their opinion of the man, or their potential vote. That ship has long sailed. Edit, we have better information now and I was wrong. Per the indictments, the hush money payments continued through 2017. I thought all the stuff with Cohen's trial happened before then. Apparently covering up evidence of a crime as a business expense is frowned upon. I couldn't care less about this one. What I would like to see him get arrested for is the phone call he made to GA officials telling them to find him votes. It seems that the current main talking point in conservative media is if they are allowed to go after him, they're going to come after you next. Was I allowed to commit crimes freely before today? I sure hope they come after anyone breaking the law just the same. What I like is the counter-argument about Hunter Biden whatevers. Like brew, if he also is breaking the law, arrest him too idgaf. None of us have a cult-like relation to any politician the way these Trump supporters do. I'm at a local bar where 99 days out of 100 the TV is on Fox News, today it's on FK and Jeopardy. The other days it's usually just off. No one is watching, at all. Nobody is above the law. That's what we are told, now it's time to prove it. Can't stand the guy, but it's embarrassing and pathetic that our governmental institutions let this get this far out of hand. The guardrails seem flimsy, but now it's obvious that they always were. It's imperative that we develop some sort of reforms to avoid this circus from ever happening again. Otherwise it's just a matter of time before someone far worse gains the full might and power of the presidency. I just want him to go away. Not die, just go the fuck away. No more interviews or rallies. No more mega incels and hillbillies. Just go they fuck away. His arrest is pretty meaningless. Hell, either delay forever or plead out and pay some minor fine. What are some really dangerous things most people don't realize are dangerous? This is super vague, but I think a lot of people often underestimate the dangers of water. Like the power of a river or sea current, water on the road, slipping in the shower, etc. Removed. Walking up or down the stairs, the most common accident at home is falling down the stairs. Falling down. I know there are jokes about the whole "I've fallen and I can't get up." But it's a real danger. As we get older, our bones lose density and strength, so falling can actually cause legitimate injuries. And even if you're not old, unprotected falls are still dangerous. Street fights where people get knocked out and fall onto concrete is super dangerous. It doesn't take a lot of height to cause serious damage when falling and hitting your head. Metal folding chairs. I knew someone who lost some fingers when one slammed shut on their hand. Electricity. You can't see it until it's too late. Harmless wires dangling around will put you into the ground. Even if it looks good, it can be done wrong and start a fire. Source: I'm an electrician. Not getting enough sleep. Eating grapefruit while on medication. Grapefruit has so many bad interactions with medication, ranging from rendering the medication ineffective, to toxicity. Putting your feet on the dashboard. It is extremely dangerous. Not having enough sodium. There's always warnings about too much salt, but apparently if you don't have enough it can throw your body totally out of whack. Learned this after passing out and ending up in the ER. A few inches of moving water over a roadway. If you need someone's attention while they're using heavy equipment, in a non-emergency situation, let them finish before getting their attention. I work as a meat cutter. When I'm cutting something on the bandsaw, I have my back turned to the counter. Lot of customer expect to get service immediately as soon as they walk up to the counter. So I'm cutting something and they immediately make a loud noise to get my attention. Like picking up a metal signpost and banging it in the floor or slamming the counter. It surprises me, making me flinch depending on how loud it is. With my fingers inches from a saw that easily passes through the thickest of cow bones. I don't care how important your dinner date steak is. If I lose my hand, I will do my damnedest to punch you in the face with my bloody stump. Additional info since I received a lot of comments about it. I am not alone. I have at least one other coworker working the counter. No, the bandsaw is not next to the service counter. That would be a very bad idea. The amount of bone dust, yes, just like sawdust, produced would make it very difficult to keep the front area clean. I work in a back area, that is separated by a low wall and large open bay window. That's where we do all the meat production. That's where we can contain all the bone dust, blood, rendered fat, and other things that come with meat cutting. Also, that area is refrigerated. We have 2 massive cooling units on the ceiling with a total of 8 fans. It doesn't keep the production or refrigerator cold. But it does keep it around 50 F on average. Because of these loud fans, I can't hear my coworkers when they're talking at normal levels to someone in THW front. I can hear voices but cannot distinguish what is being said. And that should give everyone an idea of how loud these assholes are. I can hear it extremely loud over the fans, loud bandsaw and bones being sawed. Brazilian butt lifts. One of the most dangerous cosmetic surgeries. A lot of people end up with liver failure from overusing Tylenol. It's not harmless, don't treat it like Skittles. Chiropractors. I was born with quite severe scoliosis. It was cheaper to go to a chiropractor than an actual doctor growing up. This has resulted in significant damage to my back. When I finally got in to see a spinal specialist, he mentioned that upwards of 45% of his long-term patients were there because of chiropractors. He told me after reviewing years of my x-rays that the adjustments I was receiving actually made my spine worse than if I were to have not done anything. It is also pretty common for chiropractors to break bones. There were a few people that went to my doctor that were paralyzed by a chiropractor. When I was 16, a chiropractor did an adjustment that caused one of the discs in my spine to rupture. I also had my hip dislocated at one point. So yeah, chiropractors are not real doctors, and can cause a lot of harm.